Welcome to tape 3 of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Highly effective people do not really manage time. They manage self. Instead of reacting to the urgent and being caught up in the thick of thin things, effective people plan and execute according to their deepest priorities, as Stephen explains in Habit 3, entitled, Put First Things First.
Habit 3 is the time management habit of putting first things first. Habit 3 is taking Habit 2 and making it happen. It's organizing and executing around your priorities. Habit 2 is those priorities. Habit 3 is doing it. Habit 3 is the discipline. Habit 3 is the temporal or the physical creation. Habit 2 is the mental creation or the spiritual creation. All things are created twice. Therefore, I suggest that you immediately begin a process that takes time to develop and write on paper and into your mind and heart your personal mission statement, your value system, and do it with your spouse for your marriage, and do it with your entire family for your family, and do it with your work group and your department and your division and the company. As much as you can possibly do as far as your influence goes, that's Habit 2. Then organize everything else around it and carry it out, even if it means you say no to other things that people think are popular with them. Because what you're really doing is saying yes to what is most important. Look at a diagram we could call a time management matrix that is made up of 4 different quadrants. You'll notice that quadrant 1 is made up of things that are important and also urgent. Now let's define these terms. Important means it attaches to Habit 2. Your mission, your roles and goals. That's what's important. It's Habit 2. You've decided what's important. You've decided the wall to lean your ladder against. You've decided the direction. That's important. Now what's urgent? Urgent is that which is pressing upon you, that which gives a sense of urgency. You must act upon it, like a ringing phone. That phone that's ringing may just be a total waste of your time. It's not attached to your mission, your roles or goals at all. But it wants to be answered. And you could get easily sidetracked and go into management of the wrong things in the right way. Quadrant 1 is important and also urgent. We usually call those problems, crises, and they need to be attended to, or you don't survive. Or if you've got an important meeting come up, that would be Quadrant 1. Because if you don't attend that meeting, you're going to have a major problem. What's Quadrant 2? It's important, but not urgent. That means it attaches to your mission, your roles and goals, but there isn't a sense of now about it. What's Quadrant 3? It's urgent, but not important. It's pressing, it's proximate, it's in front of you, it's that ringing phone, it's that unanswered mail. It's all of those other distracting things that are important to other people, maybe, but they don't really attach to your overall mission or the organization's overall mission. What's Quadrant 4? It's a combination of being not urgent and not important. A lot of time wasting, pleasant things, extensive Monday morning quarterbacking, extensive television, unnecessary meetings, unprepared meetings, interruptions that can just consume the entire day, where you're very busy all day long and at the end of the day feel like I accomplished nothing. Now what I'd like to ask you to do, if you would, is to think of one activity in your life, one activity that if you did superbly well and consistently, that you absolutely are convinced it would produce marvelous results, the kinds of results you desire. Think of one activity. Think of one in your personal life, and then think of one in your work life, your public life, okay? Now just think for a moment. For instance, someone might say, if I were to spend deeper one-on-one time with my key associates at work and with my loved ones at home, I'm convinced that those kinds of deposits would make a big difference on the kinds of results I want. All right. Now, what quadrant is the thing you wrote in? There's only one quadrant. It's 2. It's 2. Notice the question. One activity, you know, if you did it superbly well and consistently, that it would have marvelous results. Already you've said it's important, and you're also saying it's not urgent, or you'd be doing it. See, you do it superbly well and consistently. It's in Quadrant 2. Where is PC, my friends? Where's PC? It's 2. Where's prevention? 2. Where are problems and crises? 1. Where's production? P. 1. PC, 2. Where's opportunities? 2. You will find as we go through these 7 habits, every one of them is in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is the entire key to management. You're working on the high leverage activities. Pareto, the great Italian philosopher in the field of efficiency, came up with what's called the 80-20 rule. 80% of the results flow from 20% of the activities. Those are all quadrant 2 activities. All of them. What do you think happens to quadrant 1 if you neglect quadrant 2? If you neglect prevention, what's going to happen to problems? It's going to grow and grow until there's almost no other quadrants. It may consume your life. That's called management by crisis. And management by crisis just beats you up, burns you out, fatigues you, gets very, very large. What's going to happen to quadrant 1 if you attend to quadrant 2? Gets smaller and smaller. You'll still have some of it. Things you hadn't anticipated at all. Constant changes in our environment will create some of that. But it'll be manageable. It'll be workable. But you'll always have the sense that you're working on prevention and seizing new opportunities. Now, where are you going to get the time and attention to get into quadrant 2? You can't get it from quadrant 1. If you take it from there, you'll die. You're fighting off the alligators with your shovel. Where are you going to get the time and the attention to start digging the canal, to drain the swamp, so the alligators will go? That has to come from 3 and 4. Quadrant 4 is totally worthless quadrant. Can you name one thing of any value or worth in quadrant 4? Leisure. Is leisure important? Yes. Then it's quadrant 2. There's nothing of worth or value in quadrant 4. Quadrant 3 also is essentially without value except on the part of other people. So basically you get your time for quadrant 2 from 3 and 4. The whole time you're knocking those alligators out, the moment there you have a few seconds of break, you start throwing one shovel of dirt into another direction so you can get that canal built. You just keep doing it. Just keep stealing a little from quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Learn to say no, pleasantly, smilingly, happily, but say no. Because in saying no to quadrants 3 and 4, you're saying yes to quadrant 2. And when you say yes to quadrant 2, you make quadrant 1 increasingly small. And you're working on things that will matter most, not on things which matter least. Things which matter most, Goethe wrote, must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. However, the problem is it takes certain capacities to work on quadrant 2. What's the fundamental capacity? We've already talked about it. What is it? Proactive. You have to be proactive. Why? Quadrant 1 acts on you. Quadrant 2 must be acted upon. We are made in our essential humanity to act and not be acted upon. That's quadrant 2. All deep relationship building, quadrant 2. Planning and organizing, quadrant 2. Personal preparation, quadrant 2. Exercise, quadrant 2. Reading, broad, deep reading, continual education, quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is the key. Most time management programs will teach you a checklist approach toward day-to-day planning, and you'll be essentially doing not much more than reorganizing today's crises. You have to have a longer view, at least a week, and that on the basis of even a huge view of a month, a quarter, semi-annual, annual, long-term, the 3 years, let's say, before you attend your own funeral. So the key is to think through habit 2, your mission, what you are about. Habit 3, to organize your life around those priorities and those values and to live by them. Again, let me summarize 2 and 3 together. Habit 2 is your mission with your roles and goals. Habit 3 is your scheduling around those roles and goals and mission and disciplining yourself to execute accordingly. Now, your time tool is your servant, not your master. People are always more important than things. So many times you will just simply subordinate your tool, your schedule, to a higher need. You don't think of people in efficiency terms. I had a son who was into that for a period of time, a heavy efficiency on everything, and he had for his checklist that day to pick up some books, to wash his car, to drop Margaret, to get his schedule organized, and so forth. Problem is, they were all things except for Margaret. But they'd been going for a long period of time, and he'd finally come to the conclusion it's not going to work out. So, congruent with this efficiency model, called up on the phone, scheduled about 10 minutes for the visit, and dropped her, which was very traumatic and upsetting to her, and involved a great deal more, but he was into efficiency. You don't think efficiency with people. You think efficiency with things. You manage things and lead people. So sometimes you have to bag your schedule for higher values. But if you've got habit 2 deep inside your heart and mind, you've got those higher values driving you. So if other things come up that seemingly upset the schedule, so what? The schedule is not important. What's important is your value system and your integrity toward it. So you'll immediately adapt. You're flexible. You're not hung up and guilt-tripped by changing a schedule or by not meeting some schedule. I've seen many parents, particularly mothers with small children, have a lot of hopes and desires to accomplish so many things, but all they did is meet needs of little children. And they've often been frustrated. Why? Frustration is a function of our expectations, our schedules, our expected pattern, not of our realizations. But if people are deep into mission and values, they can subordinate that schedule to the value and to the mission. And if that mother has a lot of little children around her, preschoolers, she can totally feel comfortable in accomplishing nothing but meeting needs and giving love and providing.
Stephen next reviews habits 1, 2, and 3 and outlines specific personal benefits that are attainable as one cultivates the first 3 habits.
My friends, let us review now the first 3 habits so that we feel a good and deep understanding about these habits. First is the habit of personal vision we call be proactive. Second is the habit of personal leadership we call begin with the end in mind. Third is the habit of personal management we call put first things first. I suggest there are 4 unique human endowments that animals do not possess necessary to fulfill those 3 habits. Habit 1 requires self-awareness. The awareness that you are not a script, that you can think about your scripts, about your programs, and begin the process of self-programming. Habit 2 requires the unique human endowments of imagination and conscience, where you can detect and invent meaning in any given set of circumstance. You can write your own mission statement, your own roles and goals. Habit 3, the habit of personal management, is the second creation. It is the physical creation. It is the execution and requires the human endowment of willpower. Exercise independent will when you don't want to do it, because you're not a function of what you want to do, you're a function of your values. That is the very nucleus of character. To do what you know you should do when you don't want to do it, because you know eventually what it will produce, and above all, you're maintaining your integrity. Now, I want to show what happens when people cultivate those 3 habits. It produces an internal source of personal security. It produces a sense that I am in charge of my own life, a sense of self-reliance, of independence. And you don't get your sense of worth from being compared with other people. You see, most people have derived their sense of value and worth from such comparisons. In the academic world, the normal distribution curve. In the social world, if you belong because you conform to certain norms and expectations. In the athletic world, you're number 1. Or you're not, you're number 2. Most of people's experiences have given them a sense their worth is based on other people's opinions. It comes from an external or an extrinsic source. If love is given unconditionally in the first few years of children's lives, it gives them an inner sense of security that will last them the rest of their life. If it is given very conditionally, they begin to define themselves in relation to other people with whom they've been compared. Now, if they want to exercise their proactive capacities and write new scripts, it's as if they're giving themselves a new childhood. Otherwise, those scripts will direct them, guide them, and haunt them for the rest of their life. The child is father to the man, psychic determinism teaches. It is a lie, but for people who believe it, it's true. When you move onto a totally different path, a different road, as Robert Frost wrote in his poem, The Road Less Traveled, 2 paths diverged in the woods, I took the path less traveled. That made all of the difference. I'm talking about a totally different path. It's habits 1, 2, and 3. It's building your security on your integrity to your value system. That's what it is. That's character. Now what happens? Do you want to see the immediate fruit? You don't compare yourself with others. It produces what I call the abundance mentality. But if people have been deeply scripted into comparison for their sense of personal worth, they develop a scarcity mentality. There's only so much, only so many people can be A students. Only one person can be number one. Then they immediately begin to compare themselves with other people. Those individuals have a hard time being happy for the successes of others, particularly if those others are right around them, even members of their own family. They may experience a marvelous success, and they might say to those, "Oh, I'm so happy for you, that's wonderful," but inwardly they're eating their heart out. Secretly, they even harbor hopes that people can experience misfortunes. Those are the fruits of a scarcity mentality. Can you see why it would be so hard to practice the relationship habits of 4, 5, and 6 with a scarcity mentality? Habit 4 itself, think win-win, means you're always looking for mutual benefit, for things that benefit all the people involved, including yourself. You're not into zero-sum thinking. You're not into competition. You can think cooperatively. You can think team. You can think we. And when push comes to shove, you think we the most, not the least. You don't immediately revert to that scripting unless habits 1, 2, or 3 are not deeply grounded inside the character. Then, out of a scarcity mentality, you might learn the personality techniques of win-win. But when push comes to shove, when the storms descend, what you really are will surface, and you're both inwardly torn, ambiguous, and duplicitous. And that eats at people, drains their energies, it produces psychosomatic illnesses. There are so many fruits of being inwardly conflicted. Trying to become all things to all people, you end up becoming nothing to everybody, including yourself. In one of those books I read in the Literature Review, Erich Fromm writes a paragraph at the end of The Sane Society, which capsulizes what happens when people get their sense of worth from other people. He put it this way: today we come across an individual who behaves like an automaton, who doesn't know or understand himself, and the only person that he knows is the person that he is supposed to be, whose meaningless chatter has replaced communicative speech, whose sense of dull despair has taken the place of genuine pain, and whose synthetic smiles replace genuine laughter. Two statements may be said concerning this individual. One is that he suffers from the defects of spontaneity and individuality which may seem to be incurable. At the same time, it may be said of him, he does not differ essentially from the millions of the rest of us who walk upon this earth. In other words, he's become alienated from himself and victimized, driven by the agendas, the schedules, the scripting, the programming of other people, other generations, or whatever. In fact, Martin Buber, in his brilliant book, I and Thou, traces the secularization of the culture similarly. I and Thou stands for I and Thou, God and His children. Thou, see, reverence. The next stage is I for myself, Thou for you, human beings, it for God. The next stage, I for myself and it for you, where you become a manipulatable asset or resource to serve my purposes. And the last stage is it and it, the total alienation of self. And when the culture gets mature and ripened in an alienation from the value of human life and the respect for the dignity of the individuals that are there, including employees and customers as well as loved ones, children, parents, and so forth, then a whole different paradigm pervades the culture that tends to become very alienating and dehumanizing, mechanistic, producing great misery and unhappiness. And then all there's left are pleasures, short-term gratifications. And the higher purposes that a person has thought about their own life are not being served.